Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired wetlands expert builds his dream eco-paradise, he doesn't expect war with a tyrannical HOA president. But frogs, drones, and forged documents ignite a suburban showdown like no other. This isn't just about a pond, it's about power, pride, and one man's fight for nature. I've spent most of my adult life neck-deep in swamps, literally. Restoring wetlands, building buffer zones, reverse engineering ecosystems the modern world tried to kill off. I've seen enough mosquito bites and bureaucratic paperwork to haunt 3 lifetimes. So when I finally got the chance to retire from chasing contracts and grant deadlines, I decided to build something for myself. A place I could breathe, listen to the frogs at night, maybe drink coffee without some city planner calling at 6 in the morning, asking where the runoff spreadsheet is. I bought a parcel of land in Jefferson County, Colorado, borderline rural, nestled against the backside of a suburban development called Clearwater Cliffs. The name alone should tell you it's a place where people use words like community pride and approved mailbox dimensions, unironically. My land used to be state-owned. I was actually the lead consultant on the environmental remediation of that very parcel, a wetland restoration project funded by the Department of Natural Resources. It was a dead zone when we started. Dust, erosion, some construction debris buried like forgotten sins. I turned it into a living ecosystem. When the project completed and the state auctioned the land off, I saw an opportunity. I already knew its history, its soil structure, hydrology, drainage patterns. I knew the pond we'd constructed as part of the rehabilitation wasn't just legally compliant. It was textbook perfection. Shallow basin, natural filtration, native reeds, and amphibious habitats already taking hold. Hell, I knew every frog by name, so I bought it, every acre of it, full private ownership, well outside any HOA jurisdiction, or so I thought. The house I built was modest, a single story with reinforced windows and solar panels. No white picket fence, just a perimeter trail, some native shrubs, and the pond, my pride and joy, at the heart of it all. I moved in during early spring. By midsummer, I'd counted over 47 species of birds visiting the water. Turtles were nesting, dragonflies everywhere. It felt like I'd built something sacred. Then came the envelope, white, overly formal, embossed with a gold logo that read Clearwater Cliffs Homeowners Association. I opened it expecting some misdirected newsletter, or at worst, a local invite to a pancake breakfast. What I found was a demand for immediate action. You are in violation of community landscaping standards, including unauthorized land alteration, unapproved construction of an open water structure, and endangerment of minor residents. Failure to resolve these violations may result in escalating fines beginning at $7,000. I reread that last line 3 times. I figured it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone in their office misfiled my address. Maybe they didn't realize my property was not and never had been under HOA control. I drafted a polite email explaining just that, attaching a copy of my land deed, the county parcel map, and the state contract confirming the wetlands legal construction under public supervision. 3 days later, I got another letter. This one was signed by a Karen Stokes, President Clearwater Cliffs HOA. It was printed on even thicker paper. She said my hydrostructure was a liability and a visual blight that conflicted with the community's aesthetic vision. I wasn't making this up. Her exact words were, "The pond, with its murky coloration and overgrown margins, does not reflect the clean, uniform landscaping our neighborhood strives to maintain." She ended the letter with, "Please comply voluntarily or enforcement measures will be taken through county-level escalation." I laughed. Then I got mad. Then I started checking the exact boundaries of Clearwater Cliffs. I pulled the plat maps, cross-referenced zoning records, looked into the bylaws of the HOA itself. I even called the county clerk's office to verify the property lines, and every document agreed on one thing. My land was never annexed into the development. I wasn't a member. I never paid dues. I didn't vote on their board. I owed them nothing. But that didn't stop them from acting like I did. Over the next week, I started noticing unfamiliar cars slowing down in front of my property. A silver SUV would park across the road, sit for a few minutes, then drive off. One day I saw a middle-aged woman, tan vest, white visor, that unmistakable look of pastel rage, standing near my mailbox taking photos with her phone. When I stepped outside, she speed-walked away without a word. I didn't know it then, but that was Karen. And this was just her opening move. If there's one thing I've learned from years of dealing with bureaucracy, it's this. People with a tiny amount of power treat it like a life-sustaining drug. And apparently, Karen was mainlining it intravenously. The first wave hit on a Tuesday morning. I opened my mailbox expecting the usual. Utility bill, some ads, maybe a flyer from that pizza place that tastes like damp cardboard. Instead, I pulled out an envelope stamped Community Action Notice, Immediate Attention Required. Inside was a mass-distributed letter from the Clearwater Cliffs HOA board. It wasn't subtle. A resident adjacent to our community has constructed an unpermitted water reservoir, posing a potential drowning risk, mosquito breeding threat, and depreciation of neighborhood aesthetic value. They never used my name, but they didn't need to. They included a satellite photo with a big red circle around my pond, like I was a supervillain bunker on a military briefing slide. Attached was a bullet point list of suspected violations, including possible unlicensed hydrological system, potential ecological contamination, likely violation of county runoff ordinances, and my personal favorite, the creation of an attractive nuisance. Attractive nuisance. They made a wetland sound like a strip club. I stood in the driveway rereading that letter, a cup of coffee in one hand, and an expression on my face that probably resembled a malfunctioning blender. The implication was clear. I was a rogue swamp baron threatening the safety of wholesome suburban families. Within 48 hours, things escalated. I began seeing neighbors on the HOA side stopping in clusters on their morning walks, pointing at my land like I had installed a toxic waste pit. Someone slid a flyer under the gate, printed on that fancy marbled paper, urging community vigilance. By the end of the week, I became a talking point in the neighborhood Facebook group. I wasn't part of it, obviously. Someone forwarded screenshots to me with the caption, "You should see this." The posts were insane. Unlicensed pond threatens our children. Has anyone seen the mosquito swarms yet? Standing water spreads West Nile disease. Then came the drone guy. It was a Saturday around noon. I was sitting on the deck, running some wildlife observation notes, when I heard the unmistakable mosquito whine of a mid-range consumer drone. I looked up and saw it hovering above the pond, wobbling back and forth like a drunk seagull. The thing dipped low, coming well onto my airspace. I could see the operator on the townhome balcony across the property line, guy in a sleeveless shirt with a baseball cap turned backwards. Carefully curated influencer dad vibes. He had his phone set up on a small tripod, recording himself narrating like a wildlife expert. And you can see how murky the water is down there. Totally unsafe. Honestly, this should be shut down. I walked right into the camera frame and yelled, "You're trespassing in restricted airspace. Move the drone. Now." He gave me the finger and yelled back, "It's not illegal if I'm not touching your land." He clearly had never heard of the Federal Aviation Administration's rules about drone operations over private property. Lucky for me, I had. I also had a trail cam that caught his drone crossing my property line with GPS coordinates. Proof. Timestamp. Everything packaged neatly for a complaint. When I started filming him with my own phone, he got noticeably less brave. "Smile," I called. This is the part where I send that footage to the FAA. He cursed, fumbled with the controls, and the drone jerked sideways before smashing straight into my cattails and disappearing with a very satisfying plunk. He stared at the pond like the water had personally betrayed him. "Guess it's an attractive nuisance after all," I shouted. He jogged along the property line for a few minutes, scanning the shoreline hopelessly. I did not offer to help. Eventually, he trudged home, dripping cattail mud like a defeated soldier. The next day, someone uploaded an edited video of my pond to the HOA Facebook group. They had cranked the saturation to make the water look brown and diseased. There was dramatic crime documentary music. The title read, "Local Man Builds Illegal Swamp, Children at Risk." The video ends with the influencer dad solemnly stating, "This pond could kill someone." Apparently frogs and reeds are deadly now. I reported the drone incident to the FAA, filed a notice with the county sheriff's office, and printed a laminated sign for the fence line that read, "Private property." Unauthorized drone activity will be recorded and reported to federal authorities. Clear enough. The next morning, someone taped a handwritten note to the gate. If you cared about the community, you'd fill that hole with dirt. Hole. They called my wetland a hole. I pulled the note off the gate, folded it neatly, and tossed it into the trash can. Then I looked back at the pond, the surface rippling, sunlight glinting off reeds, a heron perched in the shallows like royalty, and I realized something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a war. I didn't sleep much after the drone crash, not because I was worried, because I was calculating. If they thought I'd be some passive hermit who would quietly bulldoze a federally approved wetland because the local Stepford cult got irritated, then they severely underestimated how little I cared about their HOA lawn uniformity and decorative rocks. I spent the next morning building a war file. First came the documentation, my original contract with the Colorado Department of Natural Resources, the site assessments, engineering schematics, environmental impact reviews, and the final sign-off certificates. I even included the glossy brochure the state put out for Earth Day last year, the one that used my pond as the cover photo with the caption, "Restoring Tomorrow's Ecosystems Today." After that, I sat down and drafted a cease and desist letter. I'm not a lawyer, but after spending 2 decades working with bureaucrats, I might as well be an honorary member of the bar. The letter was concise, brutal, and had more legal footnotes than a pharmaceutical patent. I addressed it directly to the Clearwater Cliffs HOA board and to Karen Stokes personally. It opened with, "This correspondence serves as formal notification that your organization is engaging in libelous and harassing behavior, including the distribution of false claims about a legally authorized environmental site, invasion of privacy, via unauthorized drone surveillance, and public endangerment through intentional misinformation campaigns." I sent it certified mail and emailed digital copies with red receipts. Then I filed the drone report with the Federal Aviation Administration, not some casual online complaint either. I went full formal. I uploaded time-stamped GPS footage from my trail cam, including visual overlays showing the drone's path entering private airspace. The FAA had been cracking down lately on suburban drone cowboys. The odds of my complaint going ignored were slim. I also logged a report with the county sheriff for trespassing and sent a copy to the influencer's YouTube channel with a polite note. If you're going to film defamatory content on private land, at least brush up on CFR Title 14, Part 107. The next morning, I put up new signage around the property perimeter, tall, industrial-grade aluminum signs with QR codes linking to a legal disclaimer that read, "Private land. Federally contracted environmental restoration site. All activity recorded and monitored. Unauthorized drones will be prosecuted under FAA regulation." 2 hours after installation, Karen herself showed up. She didn't knock. She stood just outside the gate, arms folded, that trademark HOA scowl polished to a mirror shine. She was dressed like she was going fox hunting in a Pottery Barn catalog. Navy blazer, khaki pants, oversized sunglasses, and the air of someone who hasn't heard the word no since 1987. I stepped out holding a mug that said "Wetlands are sexy." She didn't find it funny. "You're escalating things unnecessarily," she said. "Yeah, you sent me 2 fake violation notices, tried to fine me $7,000, and let your neighborhood jackass fly a drone into my pond," I replied. "I'm escalating things." "This is a community, Mr. Jarrett. We have standards. You're adjacent to our development. That makes your choices our concern." I blinked. "That's not how jurisdiction works, Karen. It's about visual continuity." That was a new one. She handed me a packet, 40 pages of printed HOA guidelines. "I'm not in your HOA," I said flatly, flipping the packet closed. "We've received multiple complaints," she continued, undeterred. "And you're already on notice for constructing a non-compliant hydro feature, constructed under contract with the Colorado DNR. We'll be reviewing that." I laughed. "Go ahead and subpoena the state." Karen stiffened like I'd slapped her. She turned on her heel and walked off without another word. About 10 minutes later, I saw her SUV parked 2 blocks down. She was on the phone, pacing. I can only imagine the venom she was spitting into the receiver, so I took it one step further. I submitted a formal inquiry to the Department of Natural Resources, asking them to review ongoing community interference with a completed state project. I attached the flyers, Facebook screenshots, and Karen's letter threatening me with enforcement measures. I requested that the department verify the legality of the restoration site's protection status and consider issuing a public clarification. They responded within 48 hours. Not only did they reaffirm that my pond was legal, it was still registered as an officially completed ecological rehabilitation zone. They informed me that any attempt by a third party to alter, fill, or otherwise interfere with the site could be considered an environmental violation subject to prosecution under state law. Beautiful. I printed it out, framed it, and mounted it on the inside of my gate. Just below it, I added a laminated sign with Karen's quote, "The pond, with its murky coloration, does not reflect the clean, uniform landscaping our neighborhood strives to maintain." Underneath, I added, "Officially Certified Ecological Restoration. Project Colorado Department of Natural Resources 2023. 2 days later, a kid on a bike stopped and read the whole thing out loud to his friend. They both laughed, but I wasn't laughing when I checked my inbox and found an email forwarded from a neighbor. It was a screenshot from the HOA's closed Facebook group. Karen had written, "He thinks he's protected because of some contract. Let's see how protected he feels when the county inspector gets involved." That was the moment I knew she was going to pull something dirty. The knock came at just past 9 on a Thursday morning. I opened the door to find a man in his 50s standing there in khakis, a county badge clipped to his breast pocket, and a clipboard under his arm. He had the practiced neutrality of someone who'd been screamed at by 100 angry homeowners and had learned not to care about any of them. "Mr. Jarrett?" he asked. "Depends. You a contractor or a threat to my civil liberties?" He didn't blink. "Robert Gelman, County Environmental Compliance Unit. We've received a complaint concerning unpermitted water diversion and potential sanitation violations on this property. I'm here to perform a site inspection." It took everything I had not to sigh out loud. I already knew the complaint hadn't come from any random passerby. Karen had made her move. I stepped onto the porch, blocking the entrance. "You realize this property contains a state-certified environmental restoration site. You better have jurisdictional cause. I have a work order and a formal complaint filed through the county administrator's office. Your pond was flagged as an unlicensed graywater system and possible illegal drainage basin." "Interesting," I said. "That's a fascinating fiction." Did the report come with a talking frog and dramatic music, or was it just Karen's usual letterhead? To his credit, Gelman didn't bite. "I'm not here to debate. I need visual confirmation of the site and to conduct basic tests. Not without a warrant or state-level clearance. The pond is recognized by the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. If you've got a form from the DMV or someone's grandma, that's not going to cut it." He hesitated. "You're denying access to a county inspector?" "Damn right I am." I handed him a printed copy of the DNR's confirmation letter, complete with seal and direct contact info. "You want access? Talk to them. Otherwise, you can stand out here and enjoy the view like everyone else on next door." He looked over my shoulder at the pond. It sparkled in the sun like a defiant mirror. "Is that a heron?" he asked. "Great blue, 4th generation. His name's Dennis." We stood there in silence for a second, then Gelman nodded, tucked the letter into his folder, and walked back to his car. No fireworks, no angry threats, just the quiet confirmation that the HOA had overstepped again, and the county was going to have to deal with the consequences. That night, I wrote a detailed email to the Department of Natural Resources, attaching a transcript of the visit and requesting that they contact the county directly to clear up jurisdiction. I also copied in my lawyer, just in case the next visit came with more than khakis and clipboard energy. But that wasn't the end of it. Karen, clearly frustrated that her inspector hadn't condemned my land on the spot, launched an entirely new stunt. She organized what she called a community awareness video. I first found out about it when I saw the local Facebook group blowing up. A 5-minute video shot in full melodramatic glory titled, "A Child Almost Died in That Pond." It opened with slow piano music, cut to an image of a toddler's shoe floating in murky water, stock footage, and then panned across what appeared to be a child coughing and wrapped in a towel, sitting beside a teary-eyed woman claiming he'd fallen in while riding his tricycle too close to the dangerous water. The kid looked like he was auditioning for a detergent commercial. The entire thing was staged, sloppy, low budget, and deeply insulting. I recognized the background. It wasn't even my land. They'd shot the entire thing at a retention pond near a parking lot on the HOA's side of the fence. But that didn't stop the comments. He should be arrested. That death trap needs to be filled in. My kids won't even go outside anymore. Then came the emails. Anonymous accounts. Subject lines like, "You're sick and do the right thing." I wasn't surprised. I was furious, so I got to work. First, I pulled metadata from the video. A few clicks later, I confirmed what I suspected. The footage had been uploaded from a Clearwater Cliffs IP address and edited on a device registered to Stokes Family Devices. Nice try, Karen. Then I called in a favor. A former colleague of mine, Clara, works in digital forensics. I sent her the video and gave her an hour. She sent me back a short report detailing the inconsistencies, including obvious stock footage use, visual mismatch between child and stated location, timecode inconsistencies on the audio dub. She also traced the voiceover file to a Fiverr actor. The script had been ordered under an alias, KST Community Unity. God help me. I packaged all of it, metadata, screenshots, Clara's report, and sent it in a formal complaint to the county's legal division, the DNR, and the local news station that covered HOA drama like it was the Super Bowl. Then I did something I hadn't done yet. I went public. I wrote a post on my own social media, short, calm, devastating. When a federally restored wetland becomes the target of misinformation and fraud, it's not just the frogs who suffer. I've dedicated my life to preserving ecosystems like this. If you think lying about a child drowning is acceptable, maybe you're the real hazard to the community. Overnight, it got shared hundreds of times. A local environmental advocacy group picked it up. Then a middle school science teacher messaged me with an idea. Can we bring our students for a field trip? That was the light bulb moment. I wasn't just going to defend the pond anymore. I was going to turn it into a damn classroom. The first group of kids arrived on a Wednesday morning, escorted by 2 teachers, a volunteer parent, and a box of binoculars they clearly didn't know how to use. They were all around 11 or 12, awkward limbs, 2 big backpacks, the kind of kids who alternated between shouting and mumbling in the same sentence. I had set up a shaded station near the pond with a fold-out table, laminated ID sheets for local bird species, and a whiteboard labeled, "Welcome to Jarrett Wetlands, a living ecosystem." If Karen saw it, she probably burst a vessel. The kids were thrilled. We talked about aquatic plants, the nitrogen cycle, food webs. One of them asked if frogs could get rabies, and I managed not to laugh. Their teacher, Ms. Abbott, looked like she wanted to hug me when a turtle poked its head up right on cue. I pointed out Dennis the heron, who was standing statuesque and vaguely offended that his fishing was being interrupted. "He's here most mornings," I told them. "Some say he's my deputy." A girl in a dinosaur hoodie gasped and whispered, "He's so majestic." That moment alone was worth the weeks of stress, but I wasn't done. That same day, I finalized a partnership agreement with the local middle school to host monthly eco-learning visits. I also got approval from the Regional Audubon Society to list the property as a certified wildlife-friendly habitat. It didn't offer legal protection, but it carried enough clout to publicly reframe my wetland not as a hazard, but as a natural resource. The momentum was shifting. News crews showed up to cover the class visit. Local blogs ran headlines like, "HOA wants to kill this pond, but these kids think it's a miracle." Karen, of course, retaliated in the most Karen way possible. The next week, Clearwater Cliffs HOA launched their own education initiative. They posted photos of a cement-lined drainage ditch with a folding table beside it and a caption that read, "Teaching our youth about safe, clean community water systems." The only kid in the photo looked bored enough to pass out. The table had a single bottle of Dasani on it. At that point, Karen went for broke. I came home one afternoon to find another man standing on my property. This one was wearing business slacks, holding a clipboard, and walking around the pond taking photos. He froze when I stepped out. "You with the county again?" I asked, already reaching for my phone. "No," he said quickly, flashing a laminated ID card. "Marcus Dunn, Environmental Quality Solutions, Inc. I was asked to perform a private assessment of the water here. Nothing official." "By whom?" He hesitated. "Just a local community group." "Was this arranged by Clearwater Cliffs?" "I can't say." "Well, I can," I said, and snapped a photo of him and his badge. He tried to leave without answering any more questions, but it was too late. I already had the company name. 10 minutes later, I was on the phone with their main office. That's when the real fireworks began. Marcus, it turned out, wasn't a licensed field assessor. He was a junior technician. Worse, his boss had no idea he was even on my property. After a little digging, I found out that Karen, under the name C. Stokes, had submitted a request to EQS for a discrete environmental review of suspected code violations. and she'd attached a fabricated email thread claiming neighborhood complaints and visible sewage concerns. She'd sent the payment through a third-party holding company tied to her son's defunct landscaping business. I compiled everything: photos, emails, the firm's apology, and the payment trail. Then I sent it directly to the Department of Natural Resources and the state's Board of Environmental Licensing. I CC'd the firm's legal department, my own attorney, and, just for fun, the local newspaper. The headline that week: HOA president caught faking pollution complaint to shut down state-protected pond. And, suddenly, the tone shifted. The county environmental officer who had visited earlier, he called to apologize, said the initial complaint file had inconsistencies, and that a formal retraction had been issued. The DNR sent an updated letter, this time marked urgent, stating in clear language that any further harassment or unauthorized inspections would result in legal penalties for obstruction of a protected environmental zone. Karen went silent for 48 whole hours. Then she tried a new trick, a neighborhood-wide petition. At first glance, it looked like a call for cleaner community standards. But buried in the third paragraph, right after some nonsense about maintaining visual harmony with natural features, was this gem. We, the undersigned, request immediate remediation and drainage of the adjacent unregulated pond in the interest of public safety and home value preservation. I received a copy taped to my gate with the note, "Join us or be removed from our community by other means." That part was underlined. I scanned the signatures, dozens of names, but something felt off. I cross-checked a few with property records. 10 of the signatures belonged to people who didn't live in Clearwater Cliffs. 3 were names of deceased residents. 1 was the name of a dog. I'm not joking. Snickerdoodle, the Labradoodle from House 76. I had everything I needed. This wasn't just petty anymore. It was orchestrated fraud, environmental interference, and a desperate PR campaign collapsing under its own stupidity. I scanned and archived every page, contacted the district attorney's office, and submitted a formal request to investigate the HOA for falsified public documents. Karen thought she could bury my pond, but it looked like she was the one standing on quicksand now. I had a feeling Karen wasn't done. When someone that obsessed with power starts losing control, they don't surrender. They double down. Sometimes they dig their own grave with gold-plated HOA stationery. I didn't expect her next move to be outright criminal. It started with a surprise email from the county. Not a complaint this time, but something worse. A copy of an official notice of environmental concern. According to it, my pond had failed a recent compliance review. Allegedly, it showed elevated bacterial levels, structural nonconformity, and somehow possible illegal water discharge into neighboring storm drains. There were red flags all over it. For starters, there hadn't been an inspection, at least not one I had authorized or even known about. And second, I knew damn well my pond didn't discharge into anything except the occasional heron. The report was signed by a licensed environmental engineer named Colby R. Hayes, supposedly working as a subcontractor for the county. The letterhead looked legit. The tone was clinical. The implications, devastating. If this report stuck, the county could issue a cease and desist on the wetland, maybe even order partial drainage until further review. It would take months to reverse. The project's reputation would be in shambles. Karen wouldn't have to fill in my pond. She could just strangle it with red tape, but the letter felt off, so I ran the signature through a verification site. The license checked out. Hess was real. He was certified in 2 states and had worked on infrastructure contracts with the city of Aurora, but I'd never met him, and he sure as hell had never been out to my property. I would have remembered a guy named Colby. I sent the letter to my lawyer, Clara, and 2 contacts at the DNR. Within 48 hours, I had my answer. The report was a forgery, not just fabricated findings, a total counterfeit. The engineer's digital signature had been cloned, the letterhead stolen from a previous report on an unrelated construction project. But the smoking gun. The metadata from the PDF showed it had been edited on a personal laptop registered to Austin Stokes, Karen's son. The same genius who ran the landscaping company she used to funnel payments to the fake inspector last month. Now I wasn't just dealing with HOA stupidity. This was fraud, impersonation, and forgery involving state-licensed documentation. I filed a criminal complaint the same day. The DNR launched an internal review. The county opened a formal case with the Department of Regulatory Agencies. And Colby Hess, who was mortified his name had been used in a forged report, offered to personally inspect my property and submit an affidavit verifying the pond met all relevant environmental standards. The visit took less than 2 hours. He was impressed. "This is textbook," he said, scanning the reed beds. "You could teach with this site." "I already do," I said, "at least once a month." He smiled. This woman really tried to take this down. I handed him a copy of Karen's pettiness portfolio. He just shook his head and muttered, "She's gonna need a damn good lawyer." I didn't wait for the legal system to catch up. I called a press conference. Not dramatic, not flashy, just a simple podium at the edge of the pond. I invited the middle school class back, some parents, a couple reporters who had been following the story. Clara stood beside me. Colby gave a brief statement affirming the pond's legal compliance. Then I stepped up and addressed the crowd. "In the past 2 months, I've been accused of endangering children, harboring disease, and threatening a community's peace. All because I restored a wetland. All because someone in a polo shirt decided they didn't like the way frogs looked." There were chuckles. "But this isn't just about me. This is about the kind of country we want to live in. One where facts matter. Where good work isn't destroyed by fake reports and social media mobs." I held up the forged inspection. "This document is a crime. It was created to erase an ecosystem, and the person behind it, who forged a professional signature to serve a personal grudge, will answer for that." The video of the speech went viral. It was picked up by 3 local networks and a national blog that specialized in HOA horror stories. The next day, the district attorney's office confirmed they were investigating Clearwater Cliffs HOA and Karen Stokes personally for knowingly submitting falsified inspection reports, impersonation of a licensed engineer, interference with a state environmental site, prior attempts to manipulate inspection outcomes through undeclared payments. Karen's response? She called it a misunderstanding. Then she deleted her Facebook account, pulled down her yard signs, and, according to one neighbor, had a full-blown tantrum on her front lawn involving a ceramic flamingo and an empty bottle of rosé. The DNR issued a formal protection order for the site. Any further action by third parties, HOA or otherwise, would now require approval from the State Environmental Review Board. Karen had, through sheer spite and idiocy, turned my property into an untouchable ecological buffer zone. And yet, she still wasn't finished, because that's when I heard from 2 other homeowners inside Clearwater Cliffs. Apparently, Karen had done this before. When 2 separate Clearwater Cliffs residents reached out to me, I expected another wave of angry emails or drone complaints. What I didn't expect was a confession, and a damn compelling one. The first message came from a woman named Dana Ruiz, a real estate agent who'd lived in the neighborhood for over a decade. She'd always kept a low profile in HOA matters, but now she was done staying quiet. She invited me over discreetly. We met at a local coffee shop just outside the HOA's jurisdiction. She wore sunglasses like we were doing an undercover sting operation. Karen did the same thing to my neighbor 2 years ago, she told me, eyes darting around. They put up a native plant garden in their front yard, pollinator stuff. HOA said it was overgrowth and started fining them monthly until they tore it out. I frowned. Was that even against regulations? Didn't matter. Karen rewrote the landscaping guidelines after getting elected, backdated the documents, then mailed the new rules out pretending they'd been there for years. Most people didn't fight it. My blood ran cold. Dana handed me a folder. Inside, scanned letters, board meeting minutes, photos of the original yard, a copy of the altered landscaping code with metadata showing it had been created just 3 days before the enforcement notice. The second message came that evening from a man named Eric Cho, a retired hydrologist. "I didn't think you'd remember me," he said when I answered his call. "We met briefly at a water conservation forum 5 years ago." I did remember. Eric had worked with the Bureau of Reclamation. Sharp guy, soft-spoken. "She pulled the same stunt with me," he said. "I had a rainwater harvesting system on my roof. Legal, fully permitted. Karen filed a complaint claiming I was diverting runoff into HOA drain lines, threatened me with legal action, fines, said she had a private inspector's report. Was it real? Of course not, but I was 70 and tired. I took it down." There was a long pause. "You have no idea how many people in that neighborhood are afraid of her." I was starting to get the idea. Fueled by those testimonies, I worked with Clara to draft a class action complaint template and mailed it discreetly to every household in Clearwater Cliffs. No logos, no labels. Just a plain envelope that read, "If you have been threatened, fined, or harassed by Clearwater Cliffs HOA, you may be entitled to compensation. Your experience matters." We created an anonymous reporting portal. Within 72 hours, 11 people responded. One family fined for hosting a quinceañera. A military veteran cited for having a flag that wasn't to scale. A widow threatened with foreclosure over unauthorized gutter paint. Karen had built a tiny dictatorship, and now her subjects were rebelling. Meanwhile, the investigation into the forgery was heating up. I got word from the district attorney's office that they were pursuing criminal charges. The County Board of Supervisors issued a temporary suspension of HOA enforcement privileges pending the outcome. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, obviously, but Dana was. She recorded the whole thing from her phone inside her purse. Karen was livid. She opened the meeting by demanding that the board condemn the attacks on her character, then called the charges against her a smear campaign by outsiders who hate order. When one board member suggested they pause enforcement actions until legal. Clarity was restored, Karen snapped. If we don't act, this whole neighborhood will turn into a swamp. The irony was too delicious. The vote didn't go her way. 5-2 in favor of suspending Karen's authority pending legal review. And then came the final insult. The state's Environmental Recognition Program contacted me to inform me that based on the documentation and community involvement, my property had been selected for local conservation landmark status. It wasn't just a title. It came with signage, legal buffer protections, and public recognition in the state registry. The official sign arrived the next week. White aluminum, dark green lettering. Jarrett Wetland, Protected Restoration Site. Certified by the state of Colorado, established in 2023, I installed it myself at the main entrance to the property. Then I added a smaller sign beneath it. Restored by science. Targeted by petty politics, still standing. As I hammered it in, I saw a car slow to a stop across the street. Karen. She didn't get out. Just sat there behind the wheel, frozen. Watching. I gave her a small wave. She drove off. Word spread fast. Local radio ran a story. The neighborhood newsletter, formerly filled with HOA propaganda, published an anonymous editorial titled "Power in Pond Water: How One Man Took Down a Tyrant." By the end of the week, a formal recall petition had been submitted to remove Karen Stokes from the board permanently. And guess who helped organize it? Eric, Dana, and a dozen others who had finally had enough. I didn't need revenge. Karen's empire was crumbling on its own. It took exactly 27 days from the moment Karen sent me her first violation notice to the moment she lost everything. The final blow came not from me, but from the system she'd spent years manipulating. I got the call from Clara in the middle of the afternoon. I was knee-deep in the pond, adjusting a nesting raft for the spring migration, when she said, "They're filing charges." I stood up so fast, I nearly slipped on algae. Karen, 3 counts: forgery of a state document, impersonation of a licensed professional, and obstruction of a public resource. And the son, accessory to fraud. And they've opened a financial investigation into the payments he received through his LLC. It's not looking good for either of them. Claire was trying to stay professional, but I could hear it in her voice. That restrained satisfaction of someone who's watched justice run its slow, grinding course and finally land where it belongs. Later that week, I attended the public board meeting at Clearwater Cliffs. This time, I was invited. Not as a resident, obviously. I still wasn't part of their precious HOA, but as an official guest of the county, now recognized as a steward of a protected environmental landmark. I wore a collared shirt, brought my permits in a neat folder, and sat right up front. Karen wasn't on the stage. Her chair was empty. A piece of masking tape with her name on it fluttered like a flag of surrender. The acting president, a guy named Tom Wexler who looked like a substitute teacher with stomach ulcers, read a prepared statement. Due to ongoing legal matters and in accordance with HOA bylaws, Karen Stokes has been placed on indefinite administrative leave. Pending the results of the criminal investigation, a recall vote will be scheduled within 30 days. There was no applause, just a long, heavy silence. Then one woman in the back whispered, "About damn time." I stood up when they opened the floor. The room tensed, unsure what I'd do. Maybe they expected fireworks, a victory lap, or one final slap across Karen's legacy. I gave them none of that. I'm not here to gloat, I said. I'm here to remind everyone what this started as: a pond, a quiet place that brought birds, clean water, and peace. It's ironic that protecting something so natural exposed just how unnatural your leadership had become. I paused. You don't need me to fix this community. You just need to stop letting fear of messiness, of nature, of difference run the show. Afterwards, several board members shook my hand. Tom looked like he wanted to cry. Dana and Eric stood in the back, grinning like kids who'd pulled off the greatest heist of the year. But it wasn't over. The state imposed a 10-year ban on Karen Stokes from serving in any official HOA capacity in Colorado. Her home was seized to satisfy court-ordered restitution, $225,000 to me, in damages for defamation, trespassing, and attempted interference with a protected environmental site, plus $125,000 in fines payable to the Department of Natural Resources for misrepresentation and obstruction. She tried to appeal. Her lawyer quit halfway through the process. The property was listed at auction 3 weeks later. I didn't bid, but I did drive by. Someone had taken down the Clearwater Cliffs HOA, a proud community sign at the neighborhood entrance. In its place was a banner that read, "New leadership, new vision. I'll believe it when I see it." Back on my side of the property line, things changed too. I received a grant from the state to expand the wetland footprint by another half-acre. We installed benches, built a viewing deck, and constructed a small education shelter with a roof made of recycled materials. It became a regular site for school groups, bird watchers, and quiet locals who just wanted to breathe. I planted a single wooden post near the pond's edge where visitors sometimes stopped to take photos, burned into the wood by hand, built under contract with the state of Colorado, in memory of those who tried to bury it and buried themselves instead. Dennis the heron still shows up most mornings. Sometimes I wave.